Hi, good evening. I'm Amirul Aiman and you're watching AWANI Global. This week, Kuala Lumpur is hosting Canada ASEAN Business Forum 2025, held alongside the ASEAN Economic Ministers Canada consultation and under Malaysia's ASEAN Chairmanship. Joining me today are Jeff Nankivel, President and CEO of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, and Barrett Bingley, the Foundation's Asia Regional Director. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Jeff, let's begin with you. So Malaysia is chairing ASEAN this year. What makes this moment strategically important for Canada's engagement, and how does Malaysia's leadership shape Canada's role on the global stage?
Well, first, Amirul, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. I think both for Canada and for the members of ASEAN, obviously Canada's a trading country. The majority of our GDP is related to trade, and we're an open economy, and we have relied on a rules-based international trading system and on the trading relationships that we have built over a century and more than a century and a half as a country, and this is a feature that is shared by economies in Southeast Asia who have benefited greatly from a global system that has delivered prosperity and growth for millions of people across the region here, but we find this now fundamentally disrupted by the change of government in the United States, by new trade policies from the Trump administration. And so we find ourselves in Canada at a crossroads where we have an urgent need to diversify our trading relationships. About 3/4 of our trade is with the United States. This is something that the government of Canada and that the business community in Canada are determined to change by growing trade in other parts of the world. And we see a similar appetite coming from ASEAN at a time when ASEAN is also looking for new trading relationships, and because on both sides we have leaders who believe in the benefits of freer trade and the cause of trade liberalization. It's a perfect window for us to work together between Canada and ASEAN, and also in the world, in the region, and in the world more generally, to advocate for the things we believe in.
From APF Canada's perspective, APF Canada is expanding its footprint in ASEAN. Why is it so important for Canada, to signal long-term commitment to this region at this particular moment?
Yeah, thank you for having us, Amirul. It's great to be in KL today, and as you know, we've just opened our regional office in Singapore, and we have a region-wide mandate. And why this moment? It certainly lines up with Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy, but at the same time, I think that it is very much aligned with where ASEAN finds itself right now, looking for new partners. Right? ASEAN is to some degree caught between a U.S. that is reevaluating its place in the world, how it interacts with its trade partners and security partners, and at the same time you have mainland China, which itself is reacting to challenges from the U.S. and pushing an enormous amount of goods into the world. And you saw that in the trade stats a couple of days ago. Southeast Asia is absorbing more and more Chinese exports. It's putting ASEAN manufacturing under pressure, and I think that the ASEAN states are going to need to look at other business models to grow the GDP, to absorb labor, and that means looking for new partners in new industries. And I think Canada should be top of that list.
Jeff, let me bring you back to the wider strategy here. Canada has placed ASEAN at the center of its Indo-Pacific strategy that you mentioned. Why ASEAN, and what makes this region so pivotal compared to other parts of the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, I think from a Canadian perspective, if you look around, we have had very profitable, long-standing trade relationships with China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, other major economies in the region. But there's no question where we see the room for growth, it's in Southeast Asia. This is the part of Asia that traditionally has been least explored by Canadian businesses. It's understandable. It's the farthest part of the world from the center of Canada, but you know the time has come to have a new push to look at the opportunity. So we see. So I think what Canadians see when they look at Asia, they see the growth of the continued and accelerating in some places growth of the middle class in Southeast Asia is opening up new markets for new goods and opportunities for Canadian exporters and providers of goods and services to be accessing new market opportunities as you have millions of households across the region every year making purchases of certain types of goods and services for the very first time. And at the same time, Canada offers an attractive market and potential partnerships for exporters and investors from Southeast Asia to take advantage of the opportunities that Canada has as one of the world's really leading resource economies, as an energy superpower, both conventional and clean energy, and as a leading player in the technologies of the 21st century, including quantum and AI.
Mm-hmm. Following up on that, Jeff, you mentioned that Canada has obviously seen potential in ASEAN, but some might say ASEAN has often been overlooked. What more does Canada need to demonstrate it to show this isn't just a rhetoric?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I think historically Canada has not been as consistent and coherent in its approach to ASEAN as it needed to be, but I'm pretty confident. So we are an independent institution in Canada that works on Canada-Asia engagement. We're separate from government, and I think our observation would be that we're seeing a genuinely new level of commitment from the government of Canada and also from the provincial governments in Canada, who play a very important role the way the Canadian Federation is structured, and from the business community and from higher education, that we're seeing unprecedented investments of resources. The government of Canada brought forward an Indo-Pacific strategy in November of 2022. It was launched with new investments. So this, on top of whatever else was going on, there were commitments of new investments of about the equivalent in US dollar terms, about $2 billion over 5 years of new investments, including in defense, including in commercial cooperation. And Canada's been negotiating free trade agreements. So we have had just this week in Ottawa the signing of a Canada-Indonesia free trade agreement witnessed by President Prabowo and Prime Minister Carney, and progress is being made on a Canada-ASEAN free trade agreement. So these are real investments of resources that I think bodes well for the medium to long term.
Mm-hmm. Well, building on that point, you'll be highlighting Canada's digital and AI-enabled trade report. Why is this the next frontier in Canada and ASEAN cooperation, and how could it reshape trade relations?
Yeah. Yes, we're very happy to be showcasing the results of this research, which was done by two of our fellows. And what it really shows is that Asia as a whole has an incredible growth path right now on digital services. It's Asia taken as a whole has the fastest digital services growth in the world, and Southeast Asia is right there, effectively tied with North Asia. So this is the region to be looking for growth for Canadian firms. Mm-hmm. Canada's digital services trade has been growing quite robustly, but at the same time, Canada's digital services trade with ASEAN is only around 6% of our total, right? So it's quite low. So what we see here is there's a growing market, there is an offering to be made, but there isn't the connectivity yet, right? Deals haven't been realized at the level they have with, say, Europe and other places. And so that's what things like this Canada-ASEAN Business Council Forum that we're here as a knowledge partner for are meant to do, is to showcase the opportunities and hopefully raise those percentages. Because digital services are, these are high margin, high revenue opportunities both ways, and I think it's quite clear that this is one of the paths forward where people see a win-win opportunity.
And you mentioned that there are some barriers. Can you specifically pinpoint what are the biggest barriers? Is it policy, or is it infrastructure, or perhaps is it trust in digital standards?
So all the things you mentioned are considerations. There's no doubt about that. I do think that the biggest challenge is what Jeff mentioned earlier, which is simply the distance and getting to know each other. That could get to your sort of trust point, but that's kind of a foundational. You need to know people to do business with them first, right? Now, beyond that, I think we would like to see the Digital Economy Framework Agreement that ASEAN has been working on for a couple of years now. We'd like to see that finalized. We hope that Malaysia can bring that across the line during their chairmanship. And if they're not able to, I hope that the Philippines in their 2026 chairmanship is able to prioritize that. Right? At the same time, the ASEAN-Canada Free Trade Agreement that is currently being worked on includes important language on this. We can build on the CPTPP language, of which Canada and 4 ASEAN countries are a party to, right? And we have language in the just signed Closer Economic Partnership Agreement with Indonesia that Canada has signed. So there is a lot of language there to overcome barriers, right? To sort of harmonize regulatory regimes. So businesses now need to realize that's all in place. Now is the time to get on a plane and get to know each other.
Yeah. Right, I'd like to bring this conversation to the next level, which is the geopolitical side. Jeff, US-China tensions have been dominating the regional agenda. Where do you see the middle powers like Canada and also Malaysia carving out meaningful influence despite that rivalry?
Yeah, I think it's a really important moment for the non-superpowers in the world to work together more closely. And this is something where we find we have a substantial set of shared values around the importance of a rules-based international trading order. And so I think in practical terms, where there's the greatest need but happily there's also great potential is we have, for example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership (CPTPP) agreement. 4 of the ASEAN members, including Malaysia, are members. Canada is a founding member, and this is probably the highest quality, large-scale, trade agreement in recent years that's available. And so we now have the beginning of talks between the CPTPP and the European Union. And I think with the UK having left the European Union, but now has become a member of CPTPP, the first one that is truly outside the region, and Canada's a Pacific country, that I think shows you the importance and the potential for the Europeans, the players in Southeast Asia, and countries like Canada to work together to build an international trading system that can deliver real benefits regardless of whether other powers like, for example, the US decide not to participate. So I think it's really critical at this moment that those players in the international trading system be working together, and ASEAN is a major player in the international trading system today, and a valuable partner for Canada and for the Europeans, for the British, the Australians, New Zealand's, and others to be advancing these important projects.
Barrett, extending that thought to ASEAN, how can Canada work with ASEAN states to build coalitions that safeguard its regional interests, and rather than letting bigger powers dictating the rules?
Yeah, this is where I think the ideas around minilaterals and ideas around trade policy around like coalitions of the willing are going to become so important. And ASEAN and Canada are natural partners on this. Rather than trying to fix the entire WTO or create the idea of the FTAP, which was popular some years ago in APEC. You have to find areas where ASEAN and Canada want to work together, whether that's digital trade or e-commerce or green transition regulations and aspirations. Create working groups, create a path to success, measure that, and make sure that implementation is done. We've certainly been hearing today during the conference that implementation of agreements, usage of agreements can be just as important as getting them signed. Right? So first create the structures, but then make sure that you use them and you measure the success.
Mm-hmm. I want to take you to the investment picture, but EPF Canada has previewed its ASEAN-focused investment monitoring report here in Kuala Lumpur. What are the most significant trends that in Canadian capital flows that you've seen that flows into this region, and why do they matter?
Yeah. So our Investment Monitor 2024 report is the one that we've been previewing, but we've also taken a sort of 10 and 20-year look as well at the ASEAN numbers and started to look at the early 2025 numbers. So the kind of the 10-year picture is really an encouraging one. There is a major investment from ASEAN into Canada, and it's really led in a sort of signature piece by the Petronas investment in LNG Canada. Mm-hmm. Right? And you'll have seen that Prime Minister Carney on his list of major projects to fast forward, to push forward, has listed LNG Canada too. And I think there's certainly a hope that Petronas re-ups on its partnership with Canada. Beyond that, you've seen Temasek and Asian Pulp and Paper, Sinarmas, and other major ASEAN conglomerates investing in Canada. So that's been a really good story. In terms of Canada into ASEAN, in the last 10 years, it's primarily been a financial services, mm-hmm. as well as to some degree kind of technology and industrial goods and services story. Financial services clearly led by groups like Sun Life, Manulife, RBC, mm-hmm. and on the technology side, you got really solid Canadian companies like BlackBerry, who their mm-hmm. world-class cybersecurity center set up here in Malaysia, as well as Celestica, which has major operations in Penang and Johor Bahru.
And given those findings, where do you think opportunities are still being missed? Yeah.
So our research shows opportunities are being missed because actually the 2024 numbers are a statistical outlier. They've, in fact, investment both ways effectively fell off a cliff. And this is where we think this is a reaction by business people to the uncertainty that they saw coming and has now been realized in the global trading and investment system. And so what that's meant is you probably have some missed opportunities in new industries, both ways, as companies are holding back, they're holding dry powder, right? And that can be everything from healthcare to technology to commodities. I think there is some work for Southeast Asian countries to do in terms of their regulatory regimes to make Canadian investors, and that's both private sector as well as the pension funds, mm-hmm. feel safe in the region. You've actually seen Canadian pension fund investment, and which these are really some of Canada's absolutely largest investors globally, has really fallen off in the last 2 years, and I think it's because they're seeing other opportunities where they might feel safer and are really turning their head. So there's work to be done on the ASEAN side, but at the same time there's work to be done on the Canadian side as well, to showcase to all the ASEAN investors what the opportunities in Canada are, and give them a picture going into the 2030s how they can see their investments benefiting themselves and their countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, gentlemen, let's move this into a sensitive but important topic. Talk about the Palestinian recognition. Canada has just recognized Palestine, and why was this the right time, Jeff? And how does that decision affect Canada's credibility in the global south and among ASEAN Muslim majority partners?
Mm-hmm. So it's an important development for Canadian foreign policy. Prime Minister Carney made the announcement a few days ago. I think an important feature of this development is that it was a decision that was taken and an announcement that was made in close coordination with several countries that have been close allies of Canada. And like-minded countries internationally on the international stage. So this was done in concert with the United Kingdom, France, Australia, and a few others. So this was not Canada acting alone. But it should also be said that this was a move that is not without cost for Canada. Already, Washington has threatened retribution against the countries that took that step, and it's a very contentious issue domestically in Canada, as it is in many places around the world. So it was a pretty bold move by the Carney government. I think it has come at this time, in part, it's in reaction to the developments that have been taking place on the ground in Gaza and in the West Bank, and a feeling among these members of the international community, including our European allies, that it was important to send a signal about the importance of a two-state solution and to react to what appears to be an abandonment by the government of the State of Israel, the current government, under Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet coalition, of rejecting the possibility of a two-state solution. I don't think it was done. The decision made by Ottawa, I really don't think how this would affect Canada's relations with countries in other parts of the world was a major consideration in this. I think it comes also from just a very genuine place of the reaction that Canadians have had to the situation that we see in that region. And I guess it remains to be seen. Prime Minister Carney will be traveling to Southeast Asia in a few weeks for the ASEAN leaders dialogues, and will also be at APEC in Korea, and we'll see what kind of secondary effects this would have in Canada's relations and standing with players in the region. As I said, I think it's probably going to come at some cost to Canada's relationship with the United States in the short term. I don't think that's going to be a really long-term barrier, but in the short term, there could be some cost to it.
But Jeff, critics say the move came in a bit too late or was too conditional. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think it has to be appreciated that Canada is a country that has been a very strong supporter of Israel, of Israel's right to exist, that there are very strong people-to-people ties between Canada and the region in all our communities. So we have Canadians of Palestinian origin, Canadians of Israeli origin, and the Jewish community in Canada. So these are very contentious issues in Canada. It was the recognition of the state of Palestine was not something that had to be done, and it's not clear in the short term what the immediate practical benefit of doing that will be in the current context that we have. So I think the issue is not so much why did it take so long. The issue is to look at the significance of the step that has been taken and the signal that it sends.
Okay, I would like to bring this back to Canadian ASEAN relations as well. Barrett, beyond trade and investment, what do you see as the next frontiers for Canada and ASEAN ties?
Yeah, thank you. I think when you look at what's happened in the past 2 years, the frontier is really around defense and security relationships. Canada has been working with various Southeast Asian states to develop these in an institutional way that simply didn't exist before. And actually overnight, you've seen not only the signing of the CEPA with Indonesia, but also a defense cooperation agreement, right? Very important. You've seen Canada working very closely with the Philippines, our forces exercising together, Philippines and Indonesia, taking part in annual exercises. There is really significant discussions happening on the defense technology side, and hoping we'll see a lot more of that. I think Canada can be seen in the region as an excellent option in defense supply chains and niche technologies, where there's a question as to, if you're going to go with a long-term defense technology supplier, right? Do you want to be working with a country who is involved in geopolitical games, let's say, or do you want to be working with a kind of rules-based, stable partner who respects you, right? And so I think we're really well positioned in terms of defense and security, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of those discussions, as well as more institutional frameworks being laid down to support those discussions.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, I think we have about a minute left to wrap up from a strategic view. If we were to measure Canada and ASEAN ties 5 years from now, what benchmark would you consider the true indicators of success?
I would say number one, you will see significantly higher numbers in both directions for trade and investment. Mm-hmm. Number two, I think you will see, if these efforts are successful, number two, you will see significant development of the institutional channels of cooperation. So the trade agreements, also as Barrett mentioned, defense and security arrangements, and other forms of institutional cooperation, dialogues that take place at the ministerial level between governments from Canada and the region. And number three, I think you'll see the people-to-people ties increasing. Canada is a very attractive and globally sought-after destination for higher education. Mm-hmm. And the Canadian educational institutions and backed by their governments are looking to diversify the sources of international students. Mm-hmm. And so I think the third aspect that you'll see is on the people side. You will see a significant increase in the proportion of international students in Canada who are coming from Southeast Asia. And if we're really successful in our efforts, I think you would see more Canadians coming for study opportunities in Southeast Asia, including places like Malaysia that has established itself now as an international education hub. And you'll see institutional cooperation between Canadian universities and colleges and their partner institutions in the region to deliver joint programs.
Mm-hmm. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time and your insight. That was Jeff Nankervel, CEO of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, and Barrett Bingley, the Foundation's Asia Regional Director. That's all the time we have for tonight's AWANI Global. I'm Rahman. Thank you for watching. Good night.